Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I was muted there. It is the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started on our webinar today. We've got a lot to cover. My name is Jennifer Morse. I'm with MadCap Software. Today, I'm really thrilled to introduce Sophie Lissonnet. She is the technical writer and information management specialist at Fred IT, which is Australia's largest dedicated IT solution provider to the pharmacy industry. And what we're going to talk about today, as part of a rebranding and refresh at her company, Sophie recently transitioned from the Tripane HTML5 look and feel to a new, modern, responsive HTML5 top navigation skin and use the Flare templates out of the box to get her there. And today we're going to learn a little bit about her journey, including some of the considerations she faced and also some of the best practices that she picked up along the way. And one of the biggest takeaways is that with a little creativity and with the help of those templates, you can get there. It's not as difficult as you may think. And you don't necessarily need to be an advanced web developer or a CSS ninja, as I like to say, to achieve a modern, responsive output. So welcome, Sophie. We're so happy to have you with us today. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we begin. Sophie, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide so everybody can see that. Thank you. So just a couple quick housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded. So if you have to pop out early, not to worry. When we're done, we'll send a link to everybody that's registered, so you can always go back and review it. There is a questions panel in the GoToWebinar console, so encourage you all to use that. If you have any questions along the way, we'll do our best to get to what we can towards the end. Whatever we don't get to, we'll compile a list of question and answers and send it out to everybody who's attended. So with that, I think I'm done with my little housekeeping bits since we have so much to get through. Sophie, once again, welcome, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. It's good morning from Melbourne. It's about 9 o'clock now. First, I just want to give a few words about Fred. As Jennifer said, with Fred IT Group is Australia's largest IT provider to the pharmacy sector. We have a team of about 200 people who provide IT services and systems to 3,000 pharmacies nationwide. In this presentation, I want to talk mostly about the online help associated with Fred NXT, and Fred NXT is Australia's first cloud-based management platform developed specifically for pharmacy. I won't mention ERX Script Exchange because it has a very small website which is not associated with anything related to Flare. And then I'll touch also briefly onto something else where we work on, which is MedView, Australia's medication cloud. I have a few examples of some of the design we made for this particular product. Just want to run the next slide very quickly. I won't read it back to you. It's just to let you know what our branding is and what the solution is about. So we started, that's the starting point, that's a Tripane. I'm a little bit vague about the timing, so I will go with Flare releases, and I do believe this was Flare 9. So our first design obviously used a Tripane skin. At the time, the Fred NXT product stack was still in development. Our content strategy was also in development, so we didn't have clear plans, clear branding guidelines, but we needed to go ahead with providing online help in time for the day all things would come together. So we ended up creating this, looking back now, this rather colorful output, which was linked to the UI of one of the products, one of the components of the solution, which is Fred NXT Dispense, is the dispensing system, and which you could bring up to the screen using the F1 key. So we took this to a test pharmacy, and we I think I was there for about 2 hours, and I observed the pharmacist interacting with Fred NXT Dispense, and occasionally with the help system. And I must also at this point say that we were providing our solution with the hardware, and we were providing 23-inch monitors, which are fairly large. And one of the key takeaways from the observation was that users just absolutely could not locate the search, because it was located in the top right corner, which was literally on the opposite side of where their focus was, because everything was happening pretty much on the left half of the screen, and they were using the search field, I think, in the index and the glossary tabs to do their search, and were never quite turning up what they were hoping to turn up. So at this stage, we knew we wanted to revise the design, but from memory, the placement of the search in the top right corner was not configurable in the Tripane, unless you knew how to write your own code, which was not available to me. So when the TopNav schemes were issued, and I think that was as part of release 10, in the first release, there was concerns about the compatibility of the TopNav with Pulse. And I think that was addressed a little bit later on, I think as part of intermediary releases. And at the time, we wanted to use Pulse as a mechanism to provide customer support and customer engagement. So we decided to hold off from using the TopNav that was used for internal projects, but Fred NXT Online Help was pretty much had to stay in a Tripane for a little bit longer. So this is what the topic looked like at the time. Very simple. There was a breadcrumb, procedural steps, no illustration whatsoever. A lot of empty space on the right, because there were grand plans to create videos that were actually going to illustrate what the steps were, and a rather self-important footer with a lot of information about our LMS solution, which is the Fred Academy. Now, fast forward where we're at now, it's about 18 months later. Finally, we've implemented the TopNav. We've branded. We have clear branding guidelines. We have style guides. We have illustrative matter, and the homepage, the online help is actually integrated with or is linked to the corporate website. By that stage, of course, we had decided to use Pulse for something else altogether. So we're still using Pulse, but we're using it for usage statistics, and also we analyze the search reports, because that has helped us a lot improving the indexing of some of our topics, because we are in an industry that is rather jargony, and we need to keep up with with the language that people are using in real life. So this work was done pretty much using Flare version 11, and it was completed, I think, in May or June last year, just as Flare 12 was coming out. So the topics haven't. Oh, pardon. There's one thing I wanted to say about the homepage. The homepage is actually two home pages. We have a particular customer who is using Fred NXT, but in a rather more locked down version. They're using less functionality. So their homepage is presented not as a 4x2 table, but 3x2. So all this is on the same homepage. It's just conditional tagging that's hiding one or the other, depending on the target which I'm running. And then the topics themselves, they're not very different from the topics we had in the Tripane, but of course this time we have side menus. Finally, we've made a decision to use screenshots. We now have embedded videos, but they've only happened in the last 3 or 4 months. So for a long time, probably 18 months, we had simply screenshots integrated in the procedural steps. There's a topics print to a deprecated print format, which is created in the homepage, master page, pardon. There's not a lot of plugins or complicated things like that. The one I will mention, though, because I'm using it extensively, it's the Hovermaps, which is something that Mike Kelly, some of you may know, has created, and it has been very useful to present some of the information we have to present in this online help. And then in the course of discussing this presentation with Jennifer and Rachel, I decided to do a quick revision in the last couple of months, which is something I'll touch on very, very briefly in this presentation. Now, as Jennifer said, one of the things that I want to stress is that this particular online help uses mostly out-of-the-box features that you can generate from the Flare interface. I know enough about HTML and cascading style sheet to get myself into trouble, but there is not a lot of add-ons or things that have been developed externally and inserted into the work. So it's relying mostly on normal templates, master pages, and then I just want to give a few examples of some of the things we've dressed up to make them look a little bit more interesting. We have a back to top button. We've got mini table of contents. We've played a little bit with the background of the header in the skin to make it look different on the home page and the main topics. There's a few hover effects here and there, a few customized buttons, and also just want to mention how we made that little green news ribbon running along the home page. So basically, when we started the redesign, we knew we wanted a tiled design, very similar to the Tripane, obviously a little bit lighter in a color scheme. We wanted it to be responsive, and that meant, it meant very simply that should the screen be resized, the tiles had to be stacked very neatly on top of each other. And I wanted a footer in the home page that would remain stuck to the bottom no matter what. So I don't know what the technical term is for that. I call that a sticky footer. So they were my two self-imposed requirements for the design, and that's what pretty much drove the journey of discovery. I ran into a little bit of trouble very quickly with the placement of the footer. That simply didn't want to stay where I wanted it to be. And while the tiles were responsive enough, because I can create a number of divs and float them, they were never centered quite the way I wanted them. I was not happy with the way things were hanging together. So after a fair amount of trial and error and frustration, it finally dawned on me that the look and feel I was looking for was actually well in evidence in the in Flare's very own online help. So I decided to start from a template, an out-of-the-box template. So I used the TopNav Advanced template, and I started, reverse engineering some of the features that were already, and particularly the placement of the element. I didn't quite follow the advice that is given in Flare's online help when it comes to doing reskinning projects. I went a little bit frog on this one, and basically I created this new project using the TopNav Advanced template, and then I immediately dropped the elements, then the components I needed, like the style sheet, the master page, into my legacy project. I think the best practice advice is usually that is given is to design separately, and then when you're ready to actually bring back your newly designed elements into the legacy projects. But I did it the other way around, and it worked. So perhaps that's worth considering. I think it depends what your requirements are. One of the things I did is that having brought up those components from the template into my legacy project, basically I created a very simple table of content with a couple of topics which I knew had 10 points. 10 points being that one of our product, Fred NXT, has screenshots which are mostly landscape. They're very wide. It's a grid. A lot of the screenshots describe gridded elements. So I was a bit worried that was going to run into the side menu and a few other things. So I had a very simple table of content with a few topics which I knew would be problematic. And then I started running very quick builds locally just to check as I went along what things looked like and whether everything was staying in place. I must say at this point, the reason for doing that is because by that stage, my legacy project took about 15 to 20 minutes to publish, and I just wanted to be able to check my design as I went along without having to wait this length of time. So when I started looking under the hood, so to speak, of those MadCap template, what struck me was the notation that was used. It was not something I was familiar with in terms of syntax, but again, I knew enough to understand that this was what was holding the page structure together. And so I started carving very carefully, literally scooping out the text and the graphic elements which I wanted to replace with my own, while being very careful to keep those to keep the other divs in place that are actually providing the structure of the page. So it was really a case of careful reverse engineering. And as I was doing that, I was actually able to, I think that helped me become familiar with the notation, which I was then able to reuse in some other pages, which I started from nothing. But it was really a matter of getting familiar with that particular syntax and what it did, and also with the mechanics of the page that it supports. So the master page for the topics is actually very similar. I don't think I changed anything to the structure or the notation. The only thing I've added was a div on top to create my the header that displays when you print a topic, and then I created a footer, but that's about it. Everything else is pretty much as I found it. Now, first, again, in the course of discussing this presentation with Jennifer and Rachel, I felt like I had a little bit of unfinished business with the content of release 12, and particularly the responsive layout tab. So I started playing with this particular feature, and then I realized, oh, it's actually quite easy, because obviously a lot of the code that I would normally write by hand with all the risk for typos, mistake, and etc. is actually automatically generated. So I was able to redesign this pretty quickly, and I've ended up with a structure which looks a little bit more like a table with 5 rows, and this I find it a lot simpler in that there's not so many things that wrap around each other, and it's literally table, 2 columns, 5 rows, and things seems to stay lined up where they need to be. I've spent a lot of time looking at the screenshot of this responsive layout grid, and I've had to do a little bit of math to work out the spacing with the padding, but I have found this particular help topic invaluable in fostering an understanding of what the new responsive layout notation is. So I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, to dive right in and use this feature without necessarily going back to reverse engineering template. I think it's really stwell, and we need to get on with the times. So just want to go over now a couple of examples of things we've done just to dress up the page a little bit. One of the things I wanted to do, just because I thought that would be fun to experiment with, was I wanted a little button that allowed me to allow the user to get back to the top of the page by the time they scroll to the bottom of the topic. Some topics are actually quite long in Fred NXT online help. Now, there's you can find a lot of really fancy back to top buttons if you use your favorite search engine, and they use jQuery, and you can make the button appear when the screen is of a certain size and disappear when it goes back to another size. I didn't bother much with that. All I did was creating an anchored reference, which I placed at the top of my master page, and that's all it takes. And then I created a little image, which was, it's a green button, it's about 50 pixels square, and I used fixed positioning to make sure it's on stuck right at the bottom and in the right corner of the page, and the z-index is there to make sure it's actually floating on top of the existing content. And then a couple of months ago, I decided to get a little bit fancier, so I've replaced the image with a font awesome, and that allows me to create a hover effect. I'm not going to attempt live coding or anything. I'm not an experienced presenter. I don't think I'd be able to get that done. I'm sorry. I seem to have lost the pages I had open previously, so I won't even be able to show you what it looks like live. Another thing, you may have noticed there is a scrolling ribbon on the home page of Fred NXT Online Help. That's something we implemented to provide a notification to our users that new release notes are online. Now, obviously, they get emails and other modes of notification, but it's just to maintain a visible presence of the newest items on the home page. So it's done in a very, very simple way. It's the out-of-the-box slideshow with one slide displayed at a time. Each slide has a single paragraph, and in the playback, I've set it to having to loop, but also with a vertical transition. So it looks a little bit like more like the things we used to see at the bottom of our television screens, or when watching the news. So that and in recent weeks, I've added a little font also in front of it, just to I think it's how do they call that, a bullhorn, I think. Mini table of content. So they were a little bit dry and boring until Rachel started corresponding with me, and I thought, oh my God, she does have a really nice signature file. So I did borrow a little bit inspiration from the most unexpected place, and did implement this with a simple cascading style sheet, just to have a nice border which is more prominent. I think by default it's very black and white with a fine black border, and I think it needed a little bit of dressing up. So I'd like to thank Rachel for providing a little bit of inspiration. Now, going back to the skin, is what we're using in the background is an image that has been provided to us by, actually it's something that is used in a corporate site. It's a very wide image. It's in excess of 1900 pixels wide, and it's set to repeat. One of the things that we wanted to do was we really wanted the search to be really prominent. So in order to achieve the look and feel we wanted on the home page, that very big search field in the middle of the page, we had to hide it from the skin, and so we're using this CSS override to hide it, and we've added a search proxy to the topic itself. So maybe just going back very quickly. This is what our homepage looks like. All right. Now I'm going to switch over to the MedView online help very quickly. This was done in a matter of days, shortly after the release of Fred NXT online help. So it borrows a lot of elements from the design of Fred NXT online help, but obviously the branding is different. And because it's a little bit blue and gray, to try and make it a bit more interesting, one of the things I've done was to change the background image that I'm using in the skin for all the topics and replace it with a gray color on the home page, and the image which is in the background of the header becomes the hero image on the home page, and it's done by making a few changes in the cascading style sheet that is connected to the home page. It's very simple to do, but brings a little bit of visual variety to the site. During this process, one of my best friends, I think, has been the style inspect element functionality in my browser. There's quite a number of elements in the skin that you cannot style or modify using the user interface, and so being able to right-click a published an element on your published output, look at what the HTML or the cascading style sheet looks like, and be able to override them in your own project is actually quite useful. So one example of this was removing the removing the chevrons in the menus. I think if you're using menus that have more than one level, the chevrons are built in, and I couldn't find a way to get rid of them except for overriding them through my style sheet. So this is the notation I'm using. So the menus themselves have been modified quite a bit to achieve the look that I wanted, which was more in keeping with the rest of the branding. So it needs to be very green, basically. So I've had to right-click on most of those components, trying to look at the string of code and try to isolate the element in the style sheet, and then apply my own style in the cascading style sheet of the project. To do that, particularly if you're going to make a lot of changes, I recommend you annotate as you go, because you will end up with a lot of strings of code that pretty much all look like a variation on the same one, and it becomes a little bit difficult to remember what's what. The other thing I would recommend is that you use extensively the sign, which I've highlighted in green on the slide, which is the greater than, which allows you to affect only the direct child of the element that you're working on, so that you don't accidentally style other elements on the page that are also descendants of this element. There's a couple of very good slides that are in the recording, but not the PDF of this particular presentation, which was given in October a couple of years ago, that will explain the use of the plus, the tilde, and the greater than sign to actually select elements in a style sheet with a degree of precision, and I do recommend that you take note of that, because that has provided me with a lot of assistance, and that's kept me from making quite a number of mistakes when applying styling to elements using this method. Now, another thing we've done so again, still using the inspect element technique, just we've added a hover effect on the top menu items in the skin. Now, it's not something that you can do in the skin interface. You really have to go and fetch it, isolate it, and style it independently. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention before I forget is that in creating all that, also I'm very much indebted to the customer showcase on the MadCap website, and I have looked at a lot of the work done by other people. So, not everything is the product of my creativity. There's a lot of borrowing and a lot of getting inspiration from all sorts of other places. Now, what else? Yes. So, a few tools. I mean, it's very, very obvious, but if you are going to reverse engineer a lot of other work, Notepad or Notepad++ is soon going to become a very good friend. The text editor tab in Flare itself, the preview tab, and certainly the inspect element. And then again, as I was just saying, try and find inspiration in everything. I think when you're in a design phase and you're perhaps in this heightened mode of alertness and creativity, everything is interesting. You might be reading the news and find that there's a button or a border or something that catches your attention, and just grab that, keep it somewhere, and try and replicate it in your project. And that's one way of getting things to look absolutely more interesting than you would otherwise have them. Moving on to the toolbar, we've applied a couple of customization, and it's mostly due to the fact that we're using those expandable drop-down in our topics. Some of our topics are quite long, and that was a way of shortening the display while trying to impart a lot of information. The problem with those expandable drop-down is that if you're printing your topic, they don't expand. So they almost exactly they print as they are on the screen at the time. So if you forget to expand them one at a time, you will end up printing a page which has 5, 6 headers but no content. So I the next couple of slides are really going to be a tribute to the content of the forums, and particularly the contributions made by Dave Lee, who provided the code to make this work, and I actually wish that was integrated into MadCap proper, because I can't quite think of a reason why you wouldn't want to expand those headers before printing them. So that is used in the topic toolbar skin editor, and you just, all you have to do is add a new button. You can actually reuse the icon. You can name it. In my case, I've named it print expand, so that I could remember what that was. Then when you move to the style tab, you add the event code that they've provided. And then if you want to go the extra length, you can actually add a little a tooltip so that people know actually what's going to happen when you use this button. And it's very simple. It takes a few minutes to do, and it works really fine, and I found it makes a difference. Moving on to the next slide, here's another customization and another wonderful found on in the forums. Now I can't take credit for that. That was found and implemented by my colleague, but I thought I would mention it because it's also something we quite like. It's another custom button it's a feedback button that opens a new email in your email client. You can pre-fill the address. So in our case, it's going to our support board. You can the subject line is pre-filled with the topic, the title of the topic. I think it picks up the H1, and the location is the web address of the published topic, and then the rest is entirely up to you for commenting or for bringing attention to an issue with the topic. Now I've placed I've put the code on the slide, and what I've highlighted is all the places where we've actually removed the standard entries and replaced it with our own. And good, I think I'm just on time. The other thing I wanted to mention is Mike Kelly's Hovermap. I have used it extensively, and I have found it quite a notable improvement on the native, I think it's called image map feature, which resides in Flare, and it's allowed us to present a lot of complex information that some of our screens are a little bit busy. Some of our screens in Fred NXT look more like the dashboards of a jumbo jet, and we have really struggled with presenting that information in a clear and concise manner. And basically, the release of this Hovermap plugin was really arrived at the right time and has helped us in achieving what we wanted to do. So I don't know what Mike's intentions are with this particular plugin. I don't know what Flare's intentions are with their image map. But if you're not very confident with using plugins, I would recommend. But you need to use one. I would recommend that this is the one you use. It's very, very useful and very very simple to implement and to generate the code. Now, I've actually rushed through that a little bit. I'm sorry, I seem to have lost most of the examples I wanted to present on screen, but you can follow the links in the slides. The point of this presentation was to give examples of how you can dress up your design without necessarily having to resort to complex technical solutions, having to to ask your developers to give you some code or have to hunt for custom things high and low. Since the release of Fred NXT Online Help, we've added a few things. We've added videos to our topics. We've also created a UAT manual, so it's a PDF which is single source from the help topics and hooked onto the into the Fred NXT Online Help itself. As the product stack for the next solution evolves and grows, it's probably going to provide perfect opportunity to redesign and reskin and finally unpack the content of release 13, because I cannot wait to use some of the new templates. And I have found the exercise of reskinning and then also tweaking a little bit in October, November, really useful, because each time it's forced me to do a code review. Each time I've simplified the notation I've used, and I've actually found that I've removed things rather than added any. So it's a very useful exercise. It allows you to practice, which is important. It allows you to stay on trend. And once you've found a framework that you're comfortable with, you can actually iterate new designs very quickly. So the transition from Tripane to TopNav took about on and off maybe 4 months, while the latest redesign was done in a matter of weeks. So it does actually get a lot easier each time. I don't have much more to say. Just I'm going to run a few. Oh, pardon. Also, sorry, I wanted to mention the sitemap, which is another thing that Dave has provided. But maybe if we're running out of time, I've mentioned that is my wish list, which perhaps someone will take notice of. And yes, my encouragement to stay on trend and review your code regularly. And I'm going to hand back to Rachel and Jennifer for the conclusion, or take a few questions if you have any.
Great, thank you so much, Sophie. Yeah, so just a couple things I want to mention. We were talking a little bit about templates. Just as a reminder, on our website, we do have 4 new project templates available that you can download. We actually have compiled versions of them. So if you wanted to launch them in your browser and see how they look on your mobile phone or your tablet, you can play with these things. And if something catches your eye, if you want to use one of them, they're completely free. You can download them and customize them and put your own spin on them, so to speak. So feel free to pop over to our website, and it's a great way to kind of get a different look and feel, a new starting point, if you want to dress things up a little bit. And then the next thing I want to mention on the next slide, see if you can advance, thank you. So just as a reminder, you do get a discount for attending, a discount on one of our training classes coming up in February. We have a class that starts later in the afternoon US time, so if you are in Australia or New Zealand, perhaps consider registering for this class, because it will be during your morning. And so you do get a little bit of a break for signing up for that class, and it's coming up in February. So pop over to our site, email your sales rep if you have any questions. We're happy to answer those for you. And then the last thing, I think it's the last thing before we have some great questions, and I can't wait to get to them. Just a reminder, Mad World's coming up. We have a discount expiring December 31st, where you can save up to $600 on your conference registration. The speakers and the sessions, they're all on our website, so visit that link, and we hope to see you at that conference. It's going to be at the Hotel Del Coronado, which is a beautiful venue here in San Diego. If you come, you may not want to leave. I'm just warning you. It's really, really nice. So, and I think that was the last of the slides, Sophie. Was it? I think that was.
Yes.
great questions have come in, so I hope you'll stay on the line for just a little bit, everybody, and we'll kind of get to some of these. Here's a great question, Sophie. So one of the viewers said, we've noticed some tabs in the inside of Fred online help topics that we really liked. In the HTML code, they were called tab or tab. Was that from Flare, or was that a custom add-on?
No, that is a custom add-on. It's not necessarily one that's here to stay. It was a random found by one of my colleagues who wanted me to present some information in tabs, and I've had the hardest time actually finding plugins that work with Flare. And of course, one of my colleagues spent 2 minutes on the internet and turned up this thing. It's called Tabber, Tabber. I have no idea. It's free. I have no idea whether it's currently being developed and looked after, whether that's just something that was left from a couple of years ago. But I have implemented it. It worked, and that was quite a breakthrough for us. One of the things, the reason I said I'm not sure I'm going to keep it is I was looking at some section of the W3C schools site, and they seem to be they have a tab. They have a code and CSS that you can borrow that will generate similar look and feel tabs, and I have tested it on a test project which I'm running locally, and for some reason I like the cleanliness of it all, and that I'm also curious to see to get familiar with the notation that they're using. So I might actually implement it on the live site and see how we go. And I'm sorry I don't have the reference handy, but I'm happy to supply it. It's somewhere within the W3C schools. But if you want to use Tabber, I don't have any bad things to say about it. It's working fine.
Great. Thank you. So another great question. Have you seen any limitations across different browsers or browser versions as far as end users accessing the online help with various CSS modifications included?
No, I haven't. So I'm not running. I'm not fully set up, to do testing on varieties of browsers and the window versions and all sorts of things. So I occasionally access my the live site from a tablet. I have my screen here at work. I have a laptop and a rather a 23-inch monitor. Occasionally I also access it from my mobile phone. Everything seems to be working fine as far as I can establish. I think our solution is provided hardware included with recommended setup, and as far as I know, the design is works well in the browsers where I've checked it. So if someone has noticed anything, I'm quite happy to attend to that specifically. But I'm not aware that it falls apart in particular versions of Explorer or Chrome or Safari. Was this question in relation to a particular problem that one of your users has noticed, or was that just generic?
Yeah, I think it was just general. Sometimes that question comes up with different CSS modifications. Sometimes you have to be mindful. Some really old browsers don't always render some of the newer CSS specifications.
Oh, that's true. It's true that we take it pretty much for granted that not many people are using Explorer 6 or 7 anymore. So right. Maybe we're I don't know. Maybe we're kidding ourselves, but there are we do recommend that people access our systems on, there is a baseline there's an optimal baseline. I think below that we can no longer guarantee that things are working properly, but equally, I do believe it's not supported.
Right. Great. Another great question. So the comment is, nice site. I see users can search and get results from multiple documents. How did you set up this search capability?
I didn't set up the search capability. The search capability works very well by itself.
Out of the box.
It's out of the box. What I've been careful with is indexing. There's, as I said in the earlier slides, we have run the search reports in Pulse on a regular basis, and there is one which I keep referring as the failed search report. I'm not entirely sure that's the way it's named in Pulse, but that's the one that allows you to check what people were looking for and that returned no no results. And in some cases, it's the usual things. It's a typo, but it's also highlighted the fact that there's a lot of jargon in there that we need to be aware of. So in some cases, I have doubled. My topics have a particular title. There's a short description, but I've actually backed that up with a bit of indexing in the background to make sure that things. I'm sorry, I can't think of an example, but I think there is a topic which I used to call safety net. No, that I used to call family linking, which most people would refer to as safety net, and this topic was people could never find it. So we've actually used that, we've put that terminology in the indexing, and that's just to ensure that no matter how you search, you can find it, and that's about it. But there is no, excuse me, there was no work done to recalibrate or tinker with the search capability. It's pretty much the way I found it.
Right. And then just did you happen to find, just kind of an add-on to that, my own question, since you're using Pulse, do you pay attention to the search results that come up with no topics found? Does it help you rethink what to
Exactly. That's why we're running this report. We're running it less now, but we have run it quite a lot on a fortnightly basis for a number of months, because we wanted to know how people were searching, what they were searching for, and what it is that they were not finding. Mostly when as I said, when the terminology that we use was not aligned to the terminology that they're familiar with.
Right. Yeah. So for the audience, MadCap Pulse is a separate tool that Sophie uses, and it's installed internally, but she Pulse enables the output. So periodically, writing teams can run analytic reports. What topics do your users search on? What keyword searches are they doing? And I think most importantly, as you were saying, Sophie, that metric that shows you, well, in this period of time, these are the keyword searches that came back with no topics found. Those are the things your customers are looking for that they're not finding, that may lead to a more expensive support call. Not that you probably don't like to talk to your customers, but if people can self-help, obviously we know that saves quite a bit of money. And knowing how people are searching and the terminology they use can help you think about how to augment the documentation, or create like some of those indexing terms, as you mentioned, and create also some synonym relationships so that people search and find what you've actually written about.
Yes, we do have synonyms. We do have a number of C also references, and it's true that yes, we've bolstered the indexing in some areas, and it's also true that in some cases the topics were the searches were turning up nothing because simply the topic hadn't been written and needed to be. So that has also helped us redirect some of our writing effort in the right direction. So yes, if you're not going to use Pulse for communication, it is still very useful to monitor the usage and of your site, and not just the numbers, but the how people are using it.
Right. Yeah. It's it's hard to think about everything. It's nice to have the metrics and the data to show you. So, gosh, some more great questions here. So I know we're running out of time, but I just want to hopefully throw out a couple, and then we'll get to keep sending them in, because we'll compile a document and get it out to everybody. Here's a great question. Did you run into any logistical challenges when changing to the TopNav template? Did you have to rethink the way you organize your content?
Yes. The two things, and perhaps, I think that was in my presentation and I must have skipped over it. There's two things I had to do. It's to create section pages, or what I call landing pages. So in the TopNav, you know, when you click on one of the, in the Tripane, when you click on those little book things, they don't necessarily have to contain any, they don't necessarily have to hold any content. However, in the TopNav, it's better if they do, because one of the things that might happen is that it might break your breadcrumbs as well. So I have created those, what I call those landing pages, and that was the reason for using those mini table of contents, because each of those landing pages gives you an outline of what's contained in the section. So I had to resection the topic. I had to almost re-chapterize the table of content. Perhaps that's another way of saying it, to make sure that you know, it's grouped in a usable and logical way, and you have landing, you know, places to land on, and you can also, you know, if you're browsing rather than searching, you can actually get a sense of how the whole thing is organized, hopefully logically. But obviously, if you want to browse the whole thing, this is where, you know, implementing the sitemap. And I'm sorry I didn't expand on that, but do refer to the forum where this is explained, and that's something actually I wish would exist natively in Flare, perhaps by way of a skin component, because the moment we started using sitemaps, we started using them in every other Flare output that we create. It's very useful to do revisions. It's very useful to reorganize things. It's very useful even for some of our trainers to try and find things or explain how help works. So it's you know, it's a nice to have. It's a nice enhancement to an online help, to be able to give a full table of content to a user and not having to maintain it manually.
Right. Well, we have a couple minutes left. I think I have a couple quick ones here. I can throw it to you, Sophie. Hope you don't mind. Are your PDF guides reusing the content from a site?
Yes. About 90% of the PDF, the UAT manual PDF, is single sourced from the topic. The topics, I'm using conditional tagging mostly to hide what I don't want to be printed in the topic, so that in the UAT manual. So obviously, if my topic has an embedded video, I don't need that to be printed, so that gets hidden. I think the short description gets hidden. The related topics at the bottom gets hidden as well. But it's mostly single sourced from the existing help topics, and I've created 2 or 3, there's 5 checklists that were created in HTML as well, but that are inserted in the table of content of the PDF. So all the content of the UAT is made up of HTML topics. There is no, it's not a PDF that we're running on the side and simply uploading to the server. It's literally generated from the content of this project.
Right. So what probably makes you more efficient in the sense that even though a particular page or topic may live in this online help, but in a bunch of PDF files, it still only exists once. If you need to make a change to that content, you're only going to one place to make that change rather than all the disparate documents where it's used.
Exactly, and it also means that when we onboard a new site, a new customer, if I need to update the content of the UAT manual, therefore updating the content of my health topics and vice versa. So it's very, very useful to use the single. I mean, this is the very reason for using single sourcing. And that entirely justifies. And it's a great exercise as well, because doing a PDF from in Flare is it's a challenge in itself, and it's well worth giving it a try as well.
Yeah, and I think too, to kind of talk about that, there's within the template projects, depending on the one you choose, there's some great PDF templates that come baked in. So again, getting you to about 90% to where you need to go to save some time.
Yes.
And so that's why the templates can be really helpful. All right, so we're at the end of the hour, and we have a couple questions coming in. That's okay. We'll get those answers out to all of you here shortly. And in addition, we'll be sending out a couple questions came in about the project templates. We will be sending out. We can include the link to that page on our website where you can preview and view and download those project templates if you want to use them further and tinker on your own. So we'll be sure to include that. Sophie, I want to thank you for your time today. This was really informative. I think everybody really enjoyed kind of seeing your transition and your journey a little bit here, and some great considerations. Just thank you everybody for joining today. We appreciate your time, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you on the next webinar. So thank you again. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.